1816, Thomas Jefferson. Crash in its birth, the aristocracy of moneyed institutions and corporations, which already dare to challenge our government to a trial of strength in a bid of defiance to the laws of their country. Today we pick up from where we left off the last time and paint the picture of the bleak reality of corporate political activity in this country and just how far it stretches and how it affects not just our mere existence as citizens, but our collective democracy as a country. This is the part where, of course, I make the passionate plea about us being more involved and ensuring that we are advocating for pro-people policies by exhausting all the avenues of public participation, keeping ourselves in the know, educating ourselves, and ensuring that we have access to information that is non-partisan and, of course, in every way, shape, and form, honest. Today, however, let's explore a different path. Let us talk about exactly how far it stretches and what happens when we do not get involved in policy making. It's necessary to acknowledge at this point that corporate political activity manifests itself in three major ways. The first one is when corporates use big money to sway decisions, to infiltrate policy-making organs, and of course have their pro-profit laws passed, as in the case of Mexico and the US. The second is, of course, how corporate and political players, oligarchs and your government players, are in this soiled bed of corporate political activity together, as in the case of Russia. And then there's perhaps the worst case scenario when you have both at play, as in the case of Kenya. It stretches beyond just the essential things, the fact that you cannot access good vegetable cooking oil at a cheap price because we sold away that right when we put export duty, or rather import duty, on cheap yet quality oils, on plywood, on glass, in favor of certain famous families. Not too long ago, you or someone you know must have found yourselves in the list of political party, you must have found yourself in a list of political parties. You were registered for a party you had no part in. Millions of Kenyans did. Essentially, your personal information was appropriated and used for private use, which is ideally against the law, but then again, not the use of the word ideally. As usual, we took to the streets, at least of Twitter, and we made our anger known. And in our classic fashion, shortly after, we forgot about it. What kind of data was needed to ensure a mass rollout, or a mass registration of people to political parties? You're looking at your name, your ID number. And in the world we live in today, those are details that are accessible by everyone, or rather by anyone. As long as they have a building, you can get registration books and whatnot. But when you think about the magnitude and the capacity that was needed to register as many Kenyans as were registered, then you realize the rollout plan was quite planned. You are getting this information from either one of two institutions, either a government or basically your telecommunications firms, the ones that have access to such sensitive information on that magnitude. Someone can argue at this point, but you see, Steph, telecommunications firms are bound by laws, they're bound by treaties, they have data protection issues to look after. Well, so did Facebook, until their involvement with Cambridge Analytica, a dubious firm, came to light way back in 2011. The extent to which Cambridge Analytica sunk its tentacles on not just other firms but also democracies across the world was exposed by an American-based TV station, Channel 4 News, and the extent was horrifying. Cambridge Analytica rebranded Jubilee Party twice, conducted surveys with 50,000 people twice, and of course wrote down the speeches and manifesto for a candidate. Well, you would be concerned about why a foreign firm would have to write down the speeches and manifestos, considering the fact that they should reflect the Kenyan psyche, but we shall revisit that another day. The information that Cambridge Analytica used in order to advance their campaign was fronted to them by not just government, but corporates as well, because data is money. Data is big money. It was not just your typical campaign, it was psychological warfare. Cambridge Analytica tactics were not just social psychology and data analytics to determine how well to influence your subconscious. It was basically manipulation. Targeted sinister adverts, smear campaigns against the perceived enemy, poisoning information ecosystems, ensuring basically no stone was left unturned in the search for every single vote. A former employee of Cambridge Analytica talked about the extent to which they went to mine the data that they used to come up with the comprehensive attack plan for the Kenyan electorate. You're looking at your flight, as simple as magazine registrations, you're looking at your flights, you're looking at your travel destinations, you're looking at money, transactions, in all spheres, perhaps even just how fast you were breathing. That is the extent of how sensitive that information was. Who has such data? How is a company that knee-deep in scandals in the West allowed to access such data for manipulation purposes, something that has been done before? Where are our data protection rules? After investigations, they go ahead to talk about how it's no good fighting an election on facts. Of course, it's emotions that carry the day, and it doesn't have to be believable, it doesn't have to be true rather, as long as it's believable. Simply put, what happened was, your psychology was manipulated, your intelligence was insulted, and collectively, our democracy was mocked. That, friends, is what lies at the end of the road for corporate political activity. However, despite the disconcerting realities, the veil of optimism has to fall. As it stands currently, we have no laws tying us directly, at least, to corporates. We have no ways of holding corporates accountable. That leaves us in a very, very awkward situation, considering the big role they play in corporate political activity and corporate culture. Some would suggest a boycott of some of the firms that not just have, but continue to disparage our democracy over and over again by buying out our voices in the spheres that matter to us. But then again, how many monopolies is Kenya made of? How long can we go without the services of those monopolies? I'd be interested to see how that would work out. The good news, however, is representative democracy, or at least what's left of it in this country, ideally puts you in a position of power. Note the use of the word ideally. Okay, Steph, so now what? Nothing. Now you know. That in itself is a big win.